Hello, welcome to the first lesson of the science class. This is about plant and animal cells. We'll have a brief overview and look at what plant and animal cells are, and then we'll dive deeper. In next lessons, we'll learn even more at more advanced levels what these amazing things are. So, what are cells? Cells are basically just building blocks of all things that are alive. Every living thing will have at least one cell. So in this lesson, we're going to compare the cell to a factory. A cell has many different organelles. Like organs, different organelles have many different functions. If you don't know, organelles are a smaller version of organs. Each organelle is like a worker or part of a factory, and they all work together to make the cell function. So I will be comparing the organelles to parts of a factory that makes chocolate bars. So think of the cell like a chocolate bar factory. So the chocolate bars will represent proteins that a cell makes on a daily basis. So this is a diagram of an animal cell. Now it probably looks like a bunch of random words and stuff, but we'll simplify the terms and learn what they mean. So a key takeaway to notice here is that an animal cell diagram is very rounded. It's round, the outside layer is pretty thin compared to a plant cell. As you can see, the outside layer is pretty thick. We'll understand what these are and what they're made of, but for now, just keep this in mind. First up here, we have the cell wall. As you can see, the cell wall here. So the cell wall is only in plants. It's only in the plant cell. It makes the cell stiff, providing the cell with mechanical support and giving it protection. Animal cells do not have cell walls. So take a guess to why animals don't have cell walls, but plants do. Well, it's simple. Plants don't move, or at least they don't move nearly as much as animals do. And the cell wall is very stiff, that restricts movement, which causes plants to only have cell walls other than animals. And we can compare the cell wall to the walls of a factory, like a brick wall you see here. It gives protection and support to the entire factory. Next is cell membrane. So we'll go back to the animal cell. As you can see, we can see the animal cell membrane here, as well as the plant cell. We can see the cell membrane right here, but it's under the cell wall. In the animal cell, it's exposed. Yeah, so the cell membrane is a protective layer that surrounds every cell and separates it. It is found inside of the cell wall, and it's kind of like the skin. It's made out of fats and proteins. Fats, also known as lipids. It's like the skin of the cell, and it controls what comes in and what goes out, similar to a door in a factory. So without the cell wall, all the ingredients and all the organelles, everything inside the cell will just spill out. That's why the cell membrane is so important. It also controls what goes in, such as important items like oxygen and other important stuff, but keeps harmful stuff like invaders and antigens out. Next, we have the cytoplasm. So it's just a thick solution which the organelles are found. They're basically kind of floating around, but they're pretty secure, such as beams in a factory that keep everything together. Substances such as salts, nutrients, and minerals are dissolved and somewhat stored in the cytoplasm, waiting to be used. Next is the big nucleus. We'll go back to the diagram. So as you can see, we have the nucleolus and the nuclear membrane and the nucleus right here in the animal cell diagram. And in the plant cell, we see the nucleus with nucleolus right here. So the nucleus is the control center. It's like the boss of the factory. It contains DNA, which stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and is the genetic material that directs all activities of the cell. You will learn more about DNA in the next class. Ribosomes, we'll go back to the diagram. You'll see ribosomes are these little dots somewhat scattered around. And ribosomes are just the workers of the factory. They're little round structures and they produce proteins. Proteins are made up of amino acids and they're the building block of your body. Similar to cells, but they're on a much smaller scale. They're found to the cytoplasm or attached to the ER. ER stands for endoplasmic reticulum. We'll learn about that soon. As you can see, we can see the rough ER right here, which has the same little dots, which are the ribosomes. So next we have the endoplasmic reticulum. So the ER is the ribbony looking thing in the cell. It has two types, the smooth ER and the rough ER. For now, we'll just learn about the superficial stuff. The smooth ER has fats, and the rough ER has proteins. Not necessarily has, but it's associated with these things. And you saw the rough ER had ribosomes on them, and ribosomes produce proteins. So yeah, you'll see what they do soon in the next episode. Next, we have the Golgi body. So that's the diagram. We have the Golgi body here. They're sort of like strands. And the Golgi body here. In this, they look a bit, I'm not sure what they look like. But the Golgi body basically packages and prepares proteins for export from the cell. So as we said in the beginning, chocolate bars represent the proteins. If we just sold chocolate bars without any wrapper, without any boxes, with nothing, then we couldn't sell them, right? They wouldn't be protected, they would be damaged, all sort of stuff. So the Golgi body is like the packager. It prepares proteins for export from the cell and packages them. Next is the lysosome. So the lysosome is essentially, he's like the janitor. He cleans up the cell. He makes sure there's no waste and other stuff left in the cell. So the way it cleans up is it sort of digested, like the digestive center of the cell. It produces many types of enzymes, which are just substances that break down food. We produce enzymes such as in our saliva, which break down sugars and stuff. Next, we got the vacuoles. So vacuoles they're sort of like a double thing. First, vacuoles store toxic waste as well as useful products such as water. They're like water tanks, and they're mainly found in plants. You'll see later what we mean about that. Smaller vacuoles are also used to transport products inside and outside the cell. And you might be wondering, why is the vacuole storing toxic waste? But you'll see as we go here. If the vacuole, which is right here, if it was just storing or not storing the toxic waste, it was just floating around, then that would be really harmful for the cell. So it stores them and waits for it to be expelled. And one big difference of plant cells and animal cells. Plant cells have a very big vacuole, as you can see over here. Large central vacuole, as animal cells have much smaller vacuoles. And take a guess why you think vacuoles are much bigger in plants. As we saw here, vacuoles store water, right? So the answer is plants need much more water and need to store much more water than animals. That's why they have a larger water storage area or vacuole. So next is the chloroplast. This is also only in plants. This is pretty straightforward. You probably already know about this. So chloroplasts contain a green pigment called chlorophyll that traps sunlight and converts it into sugars by a process called photosynthesis. We'll learn about photosynthesis in another episode, but the sugars are a source of energy for the plants and animals that eat them, and this is why plants are green, because of this green pigment. Next up is the mitochondria. So this is a classic phrase you'll remember. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It produces all the energy, and it's like a furnace in a factory. But you give the furnace fuel, and in turn, it produces energy. So we give the mitochondria glucose, and using the glucose, it makes energy. So in order to get glucose, we have to eat food. We get those sugars, that glucose from food. But plants make their own, since chloroplasts take sunlight in and make it glucose. So that's the main problem I see students struggling with. We'll go back to the diagram. So yeah, animals get their food from outer sources and turn that into glucose. And that glucose is processed by the mitochondria, which is turned into energy. While plants, on the other hand, they get sunlight and water and all of the stuff involved in the chemical reaction of photosynthesis, and they turn that into glucose. And that is processed by their mitochondria, and that is turned into energy. Yeah, so the mitochondria, as we said, it's like a factory or it's like a furnace in a factory. So now we have proteins or chocolate bars. That's our goal, and that was our goal all along. And we'll just take a quick review over these diagrams. One thing I want you to notice is that we have the animal cell. It's much more rounded, much more organic than, say, the plant cell, which is sort of like a rectangle, a rounded rectangle. This is because animals tend to come in more irregular, moving shapes, while plants are more stationary, stiff, and somewhat geometrical. Not really. Yeah. And I'll give a link to this quizzes in the description. This is a practice you can use to just review about cells. And that's it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.